Welcome, Terri, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about astrology.
Wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into astrology? A little bit about your background on it.
Sure. When I was a teenager, I used to get these little Dale horoscope magazines and I would read them. And then my sister encouraged my mother to get me a little astrology computer. And it was just a handheld, but it would say, you know, what the sign of the sun was, the Mercury, Venus, Mars. So you could put in a birth date and it would give you that information.
Okay.
And then one of my coworkers, when I was in my early 20s, went to an astrologer. And as soon as I saw the chart, I knew I wanted to learn it. And I started studying. So it's been quite a trek. I've studied with astrologers from New Mexico to California, with Steven Forrest, who's an evolutionary astrologer. And what that means is that we're looking at how our past lives influence now and where we might get hooked or have, you know, kind of dead end goals or directions that we go in. And what is our purpose? So that, when people say, what's my calling or what am I here to do? You can really look at the astrology chart and give people some guidance. It's not a prediction, it's questions. It's really good questions to ask yourself. And that's what astrology does. It opens up the ability for self-knowledge and self-discovery like no other thing.
Wow. Yes, I love astrology. And so why today, especially today, is astrology so important? Because I know there's different types of astrologies, and what is it? How can we best use the astrology today for the people?
Well, one of the things I wanted to share is that astrology dates back in almost every culture. It's about 23,000 years old, according to Vedic astrology, 25,000 years old. And when you think about how we use it today, it's almost like a map or a guide that we can use. And I can pop up a little chart to show you what an astrology chart looks like. And this is something that, let's see, I want to make sure that I'm doing the share correctly. All right, appreciate your patience here. There we go.
There we go. Okay.
All right. So with astrology, you can see that there are these glyphs. And when I was first getting into astrology, what fascinated me about it was the glyphs. And we see glyphs and symbols in pyramids. Stonehenge is also set up to use for timing and seasons and cycles. And that is exactly the same thing as astrology, that there are seasons and cycles that we go through. And instead of saying something is good or bad, which is really not helpful, it's more accurate to say it's easy or it's hard. And struggle's not always a bad thing.
Right.
So a lot of times, some of the most difficult things that we go through end up being the things we learn the most from and give us the most knowledge. So astrology could kind of say, this may be a rocky time, and it can show you how to work with the energies that are present. So if we look at right now, we've had the planet Saturn just went into the sign of Pisces. You can see my cursor kind of circling it there. And Saturn is always an area of life experience. These are all areas of life experience. So depending on where it falls in your chart is where you have a mountain to climb. It's where you have to take more responsibility for, as a collective. Having Saturn in Pisces is about a service and how are we going to take care of our environment? Because it's environmental. And it's also dissolving some boundaries that, or maybe even beliefs that don't support us anymore. it's such a broad stroke, and it'll be experienced differently for everyone. But this influence of Saturn in Pisces is a good 2.5 year learning experience. It's not a flip of a switch. It's not just this kind of light bulb moment. It's this slog of one foot in front of the other, moving through
And
things.
so that energy is whatever house it is for each individual, that will last there for 2 years for them. Yeah,
absolutely. That's why, if you think back, that about every 2.5 years, everything shifts and there's a change. So the only thing we can really count on is change happening and how we respond to it.
True.
So if you had an astrology session this year, in another 2 years, you're going to have a shift and a change of what you're facing and what you're moving through and what you're learning, because we're constantly shedding values and beliefs. Like, who wants the pony after the age of 7? Really, if you got that wish right now, how's that going to play out for you? So that's a lot of what we look at is, what are the shifts and the timing? Astrology was used by Walt Disney to open his theme parks and to time the release of signing of contracts in movies. It's used by J.P. Morgan for financial, and Ray Merriman is an astrologer that teaches financial investment astrology. There's also astrology is used for business and timing of events. So let's say you want to get married, you could look at the timing for that. Or if you want to open a business or have a big event, what's the energy where you would have the wind at your back versus struggling to get through it? I think there are so many uses, and that's why you find it through all the cultures. It doesn't go away because it proves itself to itself when you look it up and see what's going on in your chart.
So anybody could look up their chart, and if they're going through any events in their life, they can turn to their chart and see when's the best time to do whatever it is that they're going to do, whether it's opening a business or making a big decision. I remember one time you shared with me about making decisions of buying or not buying things. I think it was retrogrades.
Right. And, I think retrogrades have gotten a really bad rap. They're not to be, if you think about a retrograde, it's a review of something. And it's really a time when you're not going to move forward. And how many times have we said, I need to think about it a little bit, or I need to go back over something before I move forward? And retrogrades give us a chance to take a breath. That's really the purpose of them, is that it's like a timeout. You can't score points in a game if it's a timeout. Wow. So if you're doing business and you do a big push during a retrograde, you might as well be throwing your money out the window.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you could save a tremendous amount of money during the year just by using that time in a productive way to help you revise, review, reorganize before you launch.
Wow. You also mentioned something about Pluto.
Yeah. If you look at the top of the chart here, you're going to see Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. And then you could reference it over here to the right where you see the glyphs that show what are the glyphs for all the astrology signs. So Pluto moving into the sign of Aquarius is more about the masses of people and the consciousness changing to more metaphysical ideas and more inventive ways to move forward with our goals, and to think about the groups of friends or people that you network with that are supportive and are more kind of in your wheelhouse, so to speak. I think it's also, pardon me, I think it's also about a level of service. If you think about how we're all one, and how our individuality plays into making the group a whole. So again, it's more of a kind of global thing, but Pluto in Aquarius, I think we're going to see a lot more inventiveness and a lot of less traditional and more far forward thinking.
Can you give me an example of what you're talking about with that? Like what's coming up?
When I'm thinking about, I mean, I know it's going to take quite a while for countries to drop the war mentality, but more of a all is one, and we're all this poisoning the world, you know, with the accidents that have happened recently. It's like, how can we work together? And this plays into that Saturn in Pisces environmentally. And how can we work as all as one instead of being patriarchal or being more dominant one over the other? How can we work together more as a global community?
That sounds like what we've been hearing a lot about, the new Earth. And moving into the new Earth. And do you think that plays into that?
Yeah, it sounds really similar to that energy. That would be very descriptive of Pluto going into Aquarius. Yeah, it's very transformative. It's almost like the symbolism is the archetype of the Phoenix, where something has to really kind of go down in flames and come back brand new.
Right.
So all the traditional things that have really not worked are starting to crumble.
Oh, I just had a thought. So that's the whole for everybody. Now, does it also affect where it is in your own chart? So if it's in a certain house, does that mean that that's what I'll be dealing with crumbling and rebuilding in that particular house?
Exactly. There will be some big transformative energy. And the other thing is that it actually frees you up. There's something about it freeing you up. And this ability to have more of a far forward picture of things. That's the energy of Pluto in Aquarius, especially Aquarius. Aquarius says, what is the rule and why? Like, why is that rule there? What does it do? Is it beneficial? So it'll be an interesting time.
Yes. Now you said Saturn has a 2.5 year before it moves into the next sign, correct? Is that what you said? Okay. So what about Pluto?
It will never really go, it will really never transit all the way around your chart. It's, I think, 100, geez, I don't even know the cycle of it. I think it's a long one. It will only transit maybe 3 or 4 houses in your chart in your lifetime. So wherever it is really important. And what we typically look at in astrology is we look at the personal planets where, I mean, it's all kind of between your ears, as above, so below. But when we look at, you know, we know right now the sun is moving through Pisces, and we know that Mercury is in Pisces, and then we can see these other planets. What's interesting is, let's say we take the planet Jupiter, because this is one of the slower moving planets. Jupiter is in a sign for a year. So that's the area where you ask yourself, how have I been settling for too little in this area? And how can I claim more for myself in this area? And because it's going through Aries right now, that means we have to find our courage to step into something to help us claim it. Because it's always a question, how can I? And then the planet where it's at, that is the how, and the house is the area of life experience. So not to turn it into a kind of a whole lesson in astrology, but it's fun to see how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it would be beneficial for people to have their chart and understand where certain planets are at a certain time, so they understand the transitions or the challenges. Is that the right word? Challenges?
Yes.
Challenges?
And
okay.
yeah. And you can also see where there's opportunity. And so having the chart is almost like timing. You can use it for business. Again, we talked about that earlier, the business chart, timing for events. And there's also relocation. So if you were going to move to a new area, you could look and see, how is that going to affect, what effect would that have? What would be the shift in the energy there for me? And there's event-oriented astrology called horary. And that's where someone asks a question for a specific time. So as soon as the astrologer hears the question, they can generate a chart from their software, and the chart kind of will have the answers in it. So similar to using tarot, but to me, astrology is just a really good timing tool.
Wow. You also use astrology. You said you do a couple other things too. What was we were talking about dreams. Do you tie dreams into this? Or use
what I've done, my astrology sign is Gemini, so it's really challenging for me to just do one thing. I'm always playing with the different metaphysical stuff, and I love dreamwork. I got into it really early on, and I think that anything that has to do with learning more about yourself is helpful. And when I do a session with someone, if they want to do dream work, we can look at that in regards to the chart as well. And I also do tapping. And tapping is a way to remove blocks or to help you move through things. They're starting to find that it's really helpful for treating PTSD. So those are other things that are kind of an addition to, being able to work with the energy. When I said, I do evolutionary astrology, that has to do with these nodes right here. This is the south node of the chart, and this is the north node of the chart. And they're associated with the moon or the feeling nature. And in your chart, if you look at the south node, it's descriptive of the energy that you're born with, kind of the things that you came in to resolve. And the north node, you could say it's more about where you feel the most alive, the thing that you're pulled to do, that you're challenged to do, that will feel rewarding, that will make you feel like you're headed in the right direction.
Oh, that's great. Like, 'cause a lot of people these days are asking, what's my purpose? Why am I here? And so knowing that would also help get in alignment with that direction, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably one of the most fascinating things. If you were to study the nodes of the chart, that is the lock, the key to the lock for
Some way to look at it.
uncovering kind of what are the things that kind of set your hair on fire.
Well, yeah, and that's where your passions lie, right?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
great. Well, thank you. Is there anything else you want to share today about how people could use astrology? Or I just see times are changing and moving so fast that I see this as an excellent tool to have in our life to make our decisions and help us through. So is there anything else that we left out today that you wanted to add?
I guess that's pretty much it. I would just say that if you give it a chance to, almost everyone knows their sun sign. Everyone knows, oh, I'm, Aquarius, or I'm a Taurus. But the thing that I think people don't realize is that they also have a moon sign, and the moon sign is how we take care of ourselves. And it can be in any one of the other 12 astrology signs. And then there's also what's called the rising sign. So if I were to look out just over the landscape, this side of the chart is where the sun rose at the time you were born. And that's how you kind of dawn on people. So that's how other people perceive you. That can be in another whole astrology sign. So when people say, oh, that doesn't work, mine, that's nothing like me, it's because there are all these other influences, and we are so complex. 49% of us wants to stay home, and 51% of us wants to go do something. So there's always this kind of push-pull going on, but the chart is a great way to validate where you're at and to kind of see, okay, when's this going to be over? If you're going through something that's really challenging, it can give you kind of that light at the end of the tunnel instead of the train. And so that's, I guess, about everything I wanted to say, but I really appreciate the chance to come on and just give you a quick snapshot of what astrology is like and some of the things that you can use it for.
Thank you so much. And I also wanted to mention, we had talked earlier that if people are interested in getting their chart, that they could go to your website and contact you, and you'd send them a chart. Is that?
Yeah, it's just Terri at terriquintellastrology.com. And if you email me with your birth time, city and state, I'll send you a chart. It'll look like this right here. And it's just my gift for reaching out. And then you can study on your own. If you decide you want to set a session, then we can do that as well. It's about an hour. And then we go over your base chart and then a little bit of your year ahead.
Perfect. And we'll provide the link to your website below.
All right.
Yeah, wonderful.
Great.
Terri, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay, thanks.